Deb.
Okay.
Fantastic. So as Stefan was saying, Mayor Gamba, welcome, welcome, welcome. Uh, if you would be so kind, please in 3 to 5 minutes tell the class a little bit about yourself and what brought you into public service.
Oh, goodness. All right. Well, for starters, I have to tell you, I'm sorry I'm late. I was in a meeting that ran long, and that is the life of a mayor. What got me into public service? I was a National Geographic photographer for several years. And while doing that, it became painfully clear to me that climate change was not only real, but it was happening faster than any of the predictions that I had read to date. And in watching politicians at all levels, I was not seeing the kind of direct action to solve that problem that is going to be required anywhere. And because I wasn't a millionaire, I couldn't run for president, so I ran for the Milwaukee City Council instead. And then ran for mayor 2 years later, and I've been the mayor ever since. So that's the short answer. The longer answer is, there's a lot of things in our world that could be better. Housing could be affordable. It could be safe and easy to walk to school. It should be. The list is endless. And all it requires is the political will to do those things. And so I wasn't seeing it. I wasn't seeing things change. I wasn't seeing things improve. As a matter of fact, I was seeing counterproductive decisions being made at the Milwaukee City Council when I was on the art committee, which was the first thing I did in the city. So that's why I ran.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. How do you think about the position of mayor and the ongoing work of a mayor? I mean, you said lots of meetings. Certainly, you have a vision for the city. How have you found it to be? What is your life as mayor look like?
Well, I spend about 50 hours a week doing it. I go to lots of meetings. Some of them are official meetings like Clackamas County Coordinating Committee or the Metro Mayors Consortium or the JPAC, the Joint Policy Advisory Committee on Transportation. These are regional county meetings. I served on the League of Oregon Cities policy committees, 2 of those. So there's all of those kinds of official meetings. And then I meet a lot with people who are aligned with the work that I'm trying to do, to learn from them, to learn about best practices, other ideas, what are other cities doing, what are ways that we can affect this, what are things that Milwaukee could lead on. There are things that Milwaukee's doing that haven't been done before, at least not in this state. And we're creating leadership in that front. And that, to me, it's interesting, having served both as a counselor and as a mayor. As far as power goes, I have the exact same amount of power as a counselor, right? I have 1 vote out of 5 on the council. That's it. I don't have veto power. I'm 1 vote. But in the perception of the public, and therefore in reality, what a mayor does and says seems to carry more weight. And so I have not been shy about being an advocate for the things that I think are important: solving equity problems, creating better transportation systems, doing climate work, getting affordable housing built, all of those kinds of things. And it's all, everything's intertwined and complex, and you need to know a lot. I wrote a little diatribe a couple of years ago about there is nobody ever that's elected to mayor that knows what they're doing on day one. Nobody. I don't care what your degree is in. I don't care if you have 6 degrees. You don't know what you need to know to do the job of being mayor. And so there's a steep learning curve. It's helpful to have come from the planning commission. And then as a city councilor, I learned a lot of sort of the nuts and bolts. But you have to have a very broad range of interests. And so the job, really, technically speaking, of a mayor and of the council is to set policy for the city, to set the sort of 30,000-foot level policy. We make some land use decisions. We make, negotiate deals. We buy and or sell property. But the big picture stuff is policy. And then the job of the city manager and the staff is to carry out that policy and to make those things happen. Did I answer the question? Because I tend to wander off.
No, I thought that was great. I think, yeah, and Anne's got that thumbs up there too. And she's gone again. Does anybody have any questions for Anne or for the mayor while we've got him here?
I can stay. Go for it. There's a lot of things happening in Milwaukee. There's no dumb questions. So you can be like, hey, what's happening at that one site over there? And we will tell you.
I got a question. I think it was like a year and a half ago or something like that when I was living in Portland. Wasn't Milwaukee one of the first towns, I guess, to declare a climate crisis in Oregon or something like that?
We were. Yeah. We had passed our climate action plan about a year and a half before that. And then we declared a climate state of emergency when the new report came out from the international report that really detailed how bad things were and how fast we needed to be moving, what our timeline was. To us, that absolutely created the moment that needed to be called an emergency. And when we did that, we also made all of our climate goals, being net zero electricity, being net zero building energy, and being carbon neutral 5 years sooner than we had originally done in our climate action plan. And we thought our climate action plan was pretty aggressive. It's now more aggressive. It may be the most aggressive in the state, or one of the most aggressive in the state right now, but it's because that's based on science. So yeah, we were the first city in the state.
Science, I've heard of that. Richard, you got a question?
Yes. It's my contention that you can't make decisions, even not making decisions. Somebody always gets hurt. Governing is deciding, who's going to get hurt. How do you deal with that in your head? How do you go to sleep at night thinking about it?
Well, there's getting hurt and there's getting hurt, right? If you have somebody who's making $30,000 a year and you make it more expensive for them to rent a home or to get to work or to feed their kids, you've hurt them. If you're a billionaire and you tax them $100 million, are they really hurt? Right? They still have millions, hundreds of millions of dollars. They're not hurt. So there are decisions that we make for sure that there are winners and losers, right? There are, we put in a sidewalk that's got a carbon footprint, right? Just pouring concrete has a carbon footprint. But the hope is that that sidewalk being there will allow thousands of people over the next 50 years that it's there to be able to walk to school or to the park or to the grocery store instead of getting in a car and driving. So yeah, there are always two sides to every decision, but what we try and do, we did a big visioning process several years ago. What is it now, 4 or 5 years ago? And the first line of that vision says, in 2040, Milwaukee is a flourishing city that is entirely equitable, delightfully livable, and completely sustainable. And we use that lens for our decisions. Everything that comes before us, we say, does this decision do those 3 things? If it does those things, then it is a good decision. And if you look at a decision we're making and it's doing the opposite of that, if it's causing harm to any of those concepts, then it's not the right decision to make.
And jump in there.
I do, just for a minute, because I think the decision-making process for staff is different than council. When we are trying to figure out if someone will be harmed, our job is to hear from everyone. If it's a decision where the rules are already written, then it is to put them through a process in which those rules are considered and fairly applied. It doesn't mean everybody doesn't feel harmed. I think Stefan can talk about countless opportunities with developers and others where they would claim that they were harmed in a planning process. But our responsibility is to hear people without politics, honestly, and to say, we hear you, we see your application, we're going to treat your application the same as we would treat an application next to us, and we're going to try and proceed from there. I think that my planners actually do a better job of that than almost anyone at the city. Even though I'm using them as the example, I think they are very, very structured in how they make sure to apply that lens fairly and equitably. And then when you get into where the staff spends their time, we defer to council to set goals, to tell us what the most important pieces are of the work we do for them. And that's where we start weighing things higher towards the goals that council has set forward. And we make sure that we accomplish the things that they outline as much as possible. In that, we still have to listen to everyone. We have to share the information that we receive from others with the council so that they can make an educated and knowledgeable decision. So maybe not what you were looking for, but that is our goal every day, is that we try and at least give people fair process in what we do.
Let me provide an answer from my experience, and Anne can say yes or no about this. But when I was a city manager, and other times when I had lots of city employees working for me, the very hardest part of this, in answer to Richard's question, was firing people. And I had plenty of opportunities to do it, hated it pretty consistently. There were only a couple people I actually enjoyed firing in all those years, and felt pretty good about that. But anyway, Anne, do you have a response to that?
I think that is the hardest decision we ever make. I'm actually shocked, Stefan, that you can even name one that was pleasant in any way. It is a terrible experience, and it's one I always hope I don't have to go through again, though I will if I need to.
Yeah, goes with the territory.
100%. We make hard decisions every day. That's what we do.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Well, with regard to issues dealing with climate change or even equity, it seems a lot of, it seems these are topics that are resonating in Oregon maybe, or even in places like Portland. Have you found issues that you had to get community behind?
Oh, the mayor did. No, I think he did a phenomenal job of it. And he's going to be like, what are we talking about? But I would say our sidewalks program, if he can talk a little bit about how we got buy-in for that, I think it'd be helpful.
Yeah, so I was a pretty fresh counselor when we passed the bond measure for the light rail the city council, 3 city councils before us had committed to $1 million towards the light rail line and then had failed to figure out how they were going to pay for that. So when the bill came due, I was on the council. And the only way we could do it was to literally take it out to the voters and say, we need to pass a bond for $4 million, or I think it was $1 million. I'm thinking of the library. So we need to pass this bond because we owe this money. And then several of us, or a couple of us, spent a lot of time on the phone calling people and saying, here's why we need to pass this bond. And the interesting thing about that, and the reason I bring it up, is that in probably more than half of those conversations, what I heard was, why don't I have a sidewalk in front of my house? When are you guys going to build a sidewalk on my street? And I am a big fan of, I moved where I moved so my kids could walk to school. I've biked to things all my life. I'm a big fan of active transportation, but it hadn't really struck me how few sidewalks Milwaukee actually had until that moment. And so that became something I started thinking about and talking about on council. And then not too long after that, we were updating our transportation system plan. And there were several parents at the planning commission meeting saying, look, we live like 6-7 blocks from our kids' school, but we can't send them to walk to school because there's no sidewalks. It's not safe. And so I reached out to those folks, to that PTA specifically, and started having conversations and said, look, we can have those things. It's just political will. We have to have a council that's willing to go there, and then we have to do the work to get there. Long story short, it took a while. I had to do some work changing out council members, which is a political story. But when we sat down to do the work, what we did was we made sure the people on the committee who were figuring out where we needed sidewalks were people that were passionate about having sidewalks. They were young parents. They were people who wanted to be able to walk from their nursing home to the grocery store, right? They were people that cared about that issue. And they did a lot of work. They worked with the engineers, they worked with the planners, they worked with the police and figured out all the routes. And they went to the farmers market and had sticker boards, right? Where you go, well, this is an important intersection. I think there needs to be a sidewalk here. Or I think there needs to be a crossing. And they listened to all that information. And then they did that over and over and over. And we had town hall after town hall. And so we came up with this plan, and the council passed this plan. These are the places we should have sidewalks and bike lanes and bike paths and all these things. And then we went to another committee and said, okay, how do we pay for this? And they did the same kind of work. They came up with lots of different ideas. They figured out how much it was going to cost and came up with ideas about how that, the different ways we could fund that. And they did the same thing. They did a lot of outreach. They went to the farmers market. They had town halls. And we did this big giant process. And by the end, when the council finally voted to put a $4.85 charge on the water bill every month called the safe fee, I always say this, and staff gives me grief, but I say that we got 4 angry phone calls. It was more than that, but it wasn't like you would expect when all of a sudden there's $5 more that you have to pay every month. People got it. People understood. Even people who weren't necessarily for that had come to enough public events where they watched their neighbors really care about that and really be passionate about that. And they went, well, I guess I'm in the minority. And that process allowed us to do something that got one of the smartest people that was ever on the Portland City Council unelected. He tried to just do it by fiat, just say, we're doing this thing, and they voted him out of office. We did a long process, lots of outreach, lots of work, and the staff was instrumental in this. Our staff has been amazing in all of the things that I've worked on in helping us reach out to the community to help them understand why we're doing this thing. And it's so far worked every time.
That's a great explanation, Mark. What Krista will get to you in just a second, but I have to tell a story that Mark, I think, will be able to relate to. You were probably at the JPAC meeting where a young man from Milwaukee who was probably about 7 years old gave a presentation about his lack of a safe walk to Linwood Elementary School.
Mhm.
And that was at a time when that group at Metro was considering, I don't know, many, many millions of dollars of federal transportation funding for different projects in the Portland region, mostly freeway type projects. And after this little kid's presentation, the entire attitude in the room changed. And I turned to the guy next to me and said, this is going to change everything. And since then, there has been funding for safe routes to schools.
So that was the son of one of the parents that I had been working with at the PTA.
Yep.
And they came in, we had them speak, both the parents and the kids, at the city council study sessions, at regular sessions. It helps people have to understand why other people care about this, not just that the stupid government is telling them what they have to do, but that their neighbors and their friends care about this and they're passionate about it. And it's key. It's absolutely key to getting these things passed.
Anyway,
So
Krista.
with, I'm real quick before that, I do want to get to Krista. We're a little bit over time for this segment, but that's okay. I think it's a great conversation. Maybe we could do one more question. We could do Krista's question, and then we'll roll on to class introductions. Does that suit you, Stefan?
Yeah, I would actually let this conversation go on more if people have more questions, because 6 months from now, people will think, God, I wish we had the chance to talk to the mayor or the city manager.
Yeah.
I'm happy to come back, as probably Ann is as well. But I'm good until I have to be in another meeting at 7 o'clock, but it's a very quick transport there. So.
Well, and I do just want to make sure the mayor knows that not only is Dan from the city here and I am here, but also we have an amazing new employee who's sitting in the audience right now. And I think she's pretending to be on her husband's account right now. So I'm going to just call out that right now we also have Jennifer Lee. She's sitting in Justin Lee's box, but she's working out at JCB Mayor, just so you know. She started a couple weeks ago.
Cool.
Okay, with that, I'm going to turn it back to Dan to pick people.
Go, Krista was up
Krista,
next.
yep.
Thank you. Thanks for your time. And my question actually is a whole new topic. So I understand if we want to address this another time, but I was curious the role that council had in business development in Milwaukee, specifically like downtown Milwaukee, and what that looks like and what their role is.
This council has, okay, let me try and figure out how to say this. For many city councils in many cities, business development is job one. They think that that is the number one thing that they should be doing, is helping businesses grow, helping new businesses come to their city. For a lot of reasons. Some of it's tax reasons, some of it's employment reasons. This council has been less focused on that. However, I will say that because of the work that we've done in other arenas, when I moved here, downtown was a ghost town. There was, I think, 2 restaurants in the entirety of downtown, and half of the storefronts were literally empty. And another quarter of them were things you couldn't go into, right? They were dark horse offices or whatever. I don't think there's an empty storefront at all right now in downtown. I might
There
be.
is,
Oh,
but
wait.
only over at Axle Tree.
Axle Tree, because they're very expensive. So yes, the brand new building still doesn't have commercial tenants downstairs, but otherwise, all of the stuff, all of those empty spaces that were there filled up, and a lot of cities lost a lot of businesses during the pandemic, and we didn't. One restaurant changed to another restaurant, but we didn't lose a lot of businesses, and some of that was due to the fact that we helped. We got money out to some of those businesses to help them. So we have not been super proactive from the standpoint of classic economic development. We are going to start doing more of that, partly because that effort also allows us to have conversations with those businesses about energy. And we're in the midst of trying to get Milwaukee to be 100% renewable electricity by 2030. And because of weird state laws, blah, 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 we can't change that in businesses that use over 30 kilowatts. So long story short, we're going to be doing more economic development work in the city going forward.
I would just add, Krista, if you know of a small business or a business that's interested in receiving outreach from the city, we do have 2 employees who work on economic development. One is Janine Gates. She's in the JCB offices. And the second one is going to be our new community development officer. His name is Joseph. He's wonderful. He starts on November 1st. So if there's something specific that you'd like to talk about, we're happy to chat.
Any other questions while we've got them?
Yeah, don't let me stifle you. If anybody has anything, please, jump out on it now. This is a great time.
Well, I've got a question.
Please.
And that's about the solar installation. When is that coming online? The one that's going to provide renewable energy for Milwaukee?
So that what we're doing is we're working with PGE. They are our electricity provider, and we will be creating a green tariff program, and that investment will allow them to build out new wind and solar and potentially some other concepts that will provide the electricity for all of the people that live in Milwaukee. The solar arrays probably won't be in the city of Milwaukee, although we are having good luck getting more solar in town. The largest rooftop solar array in the state 2 years ago was built in Milwaukee. And an even bigger one is being built out in the industrial area here very soon. So you probably noticed that Bob's Red Mill has solar. So there's a lot of solar going in here. This part of the world, unsurprisingly, I'm sure to all of you, is not the prime solar country in the world. So it is probably more efficient for PGE to build those arrays on the other side of the mountain, or to pay to have those built on the other side of the mountain.
Yes.
And then pipe the electricity to us. But we are still getting a lot of good. We set a solar goal about 5 years ago. I don't remember. Anyway, we've more than surpassed it 5 years ago. We surpassed that quite a while ago, and we're still adding more arrays.
Fantastic. Thank you.
So I think this section is winding down now, but I want to point out that one of the reasons why I decided to work in local government is because it is the level of government that is most accessible to people. And part of the proof of that is if you want to talk to Mayor Gamba, that's a pretty good chance you could call him up and talk to him. He'll have to find a way between meetings to call you back, but he'll do it. And other counselors. Try that in a really big city or at the state level. It's a much bigger challenge. And anyway, so I toss that out there. One more thing, a plug for Mayor Gamba, not that he needs it, but I found myself a number of times pointing out that the 2 hardest working mayors in the Portland region were the mayors of 2 small cities who essentially work without pay. Where the mayors of big cities get paid. And that's bothered me forever, but it was Mayor Gamba and Mayor Knapp from Wilsonville. Those 2 gentlemen were at every meeting, always working. and rarely even had somebody they could hand off those responsibilities to. So anyway, that's my plug for Mark.
Thanks, Stefan. The young woman in Justin Lee's box, I don't know if you are Justin or if that's Justin beside you, but she raised her hand.
Yeah, that's Justin. I'm Jennifer, and sorry, I wasn't trying to hide. We typed Justin and Jennifer, but it reverted. So sorry about that. I had a question when you guys were talking about the solar panels, and I know that equity and affordability is also a concern in Milwaukee. So is there any consideration, and maybe I should already know this, but to having businesses or homes that install solar to put it back in the grid, like to help support people who maybe can't afford their energy bills?
That's a great question. I would not say that there's a direct, something that direct. What I will say is that we're working in this negotiation that we're having with PGE. We're going to make sure that low-income people get the same green energy everybody else is getting and don't pay the premium. That's our intention in the negotiations. So they will be getting the green energy that's produced for everyone else. I would like to take it a step further, but I'm still wrestling with how exactly we make it happen. I had high hopes for the community solar rule that was passed in a bill, the Coal to Clean bill, about 3 or 4 years ago. I'm less enthralled with the concept since the rulemaking occurred. I had hoped that there would be a process by which we could have solar arrays that actually benefited low-income people, right? So if somebody who can afford to put solar arrays on their roof puts them on their roof, 7, 8 years in, they're getting free energy, right? Forever, or as long as those solar panels last, right? 20 years, 30 years, whatever it is. And low-income people don't have that opportunity. The community solar program was meant to do that, was meant to create that opportunity, but it was so terribly gamed by the utilities at the time that I don't really see a path there for that. So it's on my mind, it's on my to-do list of things to figure out how we can make that happen for low-income families and households. You're free to ask mean questions too. Like, why the hell haven't we filled that pothole in front of your house? Or I don't know.
Well, I think with that, I'm going to go serve dinner. But it was really nice to meet you all, seriously. As some of the people on this call know, my family actually was affected by COVID over the last couple of weeks. So we've been doing some double duty in order to try and make our lives lift right now. But my last day of quarantine is today. I get to go back to work tomorrow in person. I'm super excited. So I'm going to go eat some dinner and I'm going to go prepare for tomorrow. But it's been lovely getting to know you all. I put my email address and the mayor's email address into the chat. You're welcome to call us or email us at any time if you have questions or if there are things that you didn't want to ask in a public setting, but you would like to talk about. That's what we're here for.
Absolutely. The phone number that is published for me on the city's website is my personal cell phone. When I first took office, we had some other number that went to voicemail, and then I had to call you back and you would never reach me on that phone number. I was like, this is stupid. Get rid of this thing. Put my cell in. So I'm easy to get hold of, or at least to leave a direct voicemail or if I'm in a meeting.
Between meetings, anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you both for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Stefan,
Thank you
and
both.
thank you, Dan, for always pulling this such an exceptional experience together. I will talk to you all later.
Night, Ann. So I'm happy to come back at any point. If you get halfway through this and you go, okay, now I have some mean questions for the mayor, then call me back in.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Enjoy the rest of the class, you guys. It's a really cool experience that these guys run. I'm glad you're all in it.
Thank you.
Take care, Mayor Gamba.
Leaders.
Thanks.
So Dan, now we've obliterated your schedule.
Yeah, well, that'll
Where do you want to
happen.
take this?
You know, we got to be flexible. I will say, now that they're gone and we can say mean things about them, those are both a couple of really dedicated public servants right there. You know, I've worked for a fair number of people in my time, and you know, without getting all into it, those two are the real deal. So if you do have any questions for them, if you do have, you know, concerns about the city, ideas for the city, by all means, reach out to them. That's not just window dressing. They really would love to hear from you. We do have some slides for tonight, and I think what I'd like to do is to get those up, get us caught up, and then maybe we can kind of try to go from there. So what I'm going to do is I am going to go ahead and share, and if it'll let me share, yeah, that's what I'm talking about, just sharing the MLA presentation. Love it. Alrighty. We can see that okay on the screen? I know it's not full screen, but great, 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 great. Good, good, good. Okay, we're going to go into present mode, and I bet that immediately showed the wrong one, didn't it? Doggone it. And if we remember now how to swap them, because there is an option to do that. No? All right, that's not what we are going to mess around with right now. All right, courtesy recording notice. We talked about our courtesy recording notice. And then wouldn't you know it, Milwaukie Leadership Academy. All right, everybody, welcome. Good evening, good evening, good evening to the Milwaukie Leadership Academy. I know you're thinking it feels like we've been here for an hour already. Wrong. Some of you have been here for an hour and 19 minutes, the rest of you for 49, and somewhere in between for everybody else. Tonight's schedule is nonsensical. We are going to try to take a break here at some point coming up. Also a little bit of housekeeping and introductions, and then we're going to talk about form of government. We generally like to talk about what are called aha moments at the end of the class, which is where you say, aha, I learned about X tonight. And that is something that we do generally try to do, and I would like it if we could get to that tonight. But if we don't get to it, then we are going to make peace with that and roll forward. Hey, I know them. I saw them before. Alrighty. Agreements. I do want to try to get some class buy-in around these. These are agreements that Stefan and I have refined over the last two classes that we've facilitated together. They tend to sort of help to keep it a good, positive learning environment. There's absolutely nothing wrong with asking hard questions, and we really encourage that. But there's a nice way to do that, and there's an empathetic way to do that. So I would ask generally that we agree to show respect and empathy for each other and for our guests. My hope is that we can have some real good conversations and get answers to questions in this class. But as a part of that, let's try to keep it friendly as best we can. With that, please also seek to be actively involved in the class. So with that, you know, if we need to, I don't know, cook dinner while we're a guest in the class, just hypothetically, that'll happen sometimes. You know, this whole COVID world that we're living in, we're all multitasking right now. I'm not right at this moment, but oftentimes I am, and I know a lot of you are too. So if you need to turn your camera off, if you need to step away, if you need to make a phone call or take a text or take care of a kid or a pet, or if you're hungry and you need to go get a snack, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. While you're here though, please try to be actively involved. Stefan, this one's yours, so I'm going to kick it over to you. I fully support it, but you say it better than I do.
No, I don't know about that, Dan, but I mean, you could see based on the conversations we've already had, sometimes the facilitators, one or the other of us, has to jump in and say, wait a minute, we got to get back on schedule here. And you've been talking for 8 minutes and we need to move along, you know, but we need your acceptance of us in that role, meaning that Dan, you're okay with Dan and with me doing that, if that's what has to happen. And Dan has my permission to do that to me. And I can tell you based on last year, he wasn't too reluctant to exercise that. So.
And as I've said to Stefan, if you ever try to do that to me, we're going to have a problem. No. Going back to agreement 1, respectfully, Stefan, if you feel like I'm getting a little bit long-winded, please let me know so we can keep on track. And then last, this one I just threw on there today because we were talking about the vision tonight. And we're going to talk about the vision, I think, more when planning comes to join us in February. That might be right. In the spring. And this is just taken directly from the vision. we will seek to make Milwaukee a flourishing city that is entirely equitable, delightfully livable, and completely sustainable. This is the community vision. This was formed with input from the wider Milwaukee community. And if you're coming to work here, if you're coming to be a part of the government, which we all are in some capacity or another, let's just play along. Does anybody have anything that is not on this list that should be, or anything that is on the list that shouldn't be? Please go ahead and jump in.
So nobody jumped in there. I would ask, can we get a thumbs up on these things? Are people comfortable with them? I'm only seeing a few people down. I don't know if you can see the whole class, but
I can't. Looks like
I think Rebecca has either a question or a comment.
Yep. Please, if you've got a question or a comment, unmute and chime in.
I was just trying to do a thumbs up, but I didn't see that.
Okay, got it.
There's no option there.
Gotcha.
All right, thank you.
All right. So with that, then we'll go ahead and roll on. Yeah, that's not the right way to do that. Hey, there you go. Introductions. So for this, I'm gonna throw it up here, but then I'm also going to stop sharing in just a moment so that we can see each other when we're talking. But I am gonna say for introductions, we're looking for your name. And because we are a little bit pressed for time, there's no need to run, but let's maybe keep the piece of generally good advice to just a couple of sentences. Name, connection to Milwaukee and why you're here, and a piece of generally good advice. So my name is Dan Harris. I use he, they pronouns. I have lived in Milwaukee, as I said earlier, for almost 5 years now, about 4.5 years with my wife, and soon to be with our son at the end of November. Yeah. Also, I'm an employee of the city. I've been with the city for about 2.5 years, and this is my second year facilitating the Leadership Academy. Piece of good advice, generally good advice, if you're going to set a fence post, you want to look at the kind of soil and the nature of the soil that you're going to be setting it in. A lot of places out there will tell you need a gravel base. That's not always true. It's true in a lot of cases, but in places where there's a lot of moisture in the soil, you can just be creating an additional opportunity for fence rot. So be aware of where you're putting your fence posts. Next person, Stefan, would you like to take it?
All right. I think I've already talked enough about myself and what I did for 45 years. I volunteered to do this class in a conversation with Ann Ober soon after she arrived at the city. We both realized that we had done programs like this in other cities. And oddly, we had both learned about it and got started doing these things from the same city manager in another location long ago. Anyway, generally good advice. Wow. Yeah. Be nice. That was pretty easy. So we got to call on people and keep this
moving.
I
think just bounce it on to the next person. Go ahead and call somebody.
Justin and partner. I didn't hear your name, partner.
All right, my name's Justin. This is Jennifer. We moved here, 2 years ago. I got a job at the VA hospital. And we've lived in Milwaukee our whole time that we've been in Portland, although it hasn't been very long. Generally good advice. Do you have something?
Wash behind your ears.
It is generally good advice. Justin and Jennifer, would you like to pass it on?
Let's see. Let's scroll through the list. Sarah.
You got 2 of those.
We can't see everyone at once. Sarah Morali.
I think we have 2 Sarahs and 2 Emilys.
There's never just one Sarah. I can tell you that. Hi, everybody. I am Sarah. And I've lived in Milwaukee since about 2016, I think. And currently I am full-time mom to a 3.5-year-old. So that's keeping me pretty busy. And generally good advice, I would say, listen before you speak. Oh, I will pass on to Richard.
Hi, I'm Richard Nippon. I actually live in Oak Grove. I started coming to art committee meetings in Milwaukee when I moved here, and later on found out I wasn't in Milwaukee. But I have been active in government and plan to be. And a couple of people mentioned this to me, and I thought it would be a good idea. Good advice is don't worry, be happy.
Please pick the next contestant.
Arlene.
Hello there. I am Arlene, grandmother, and the reason I moved to Milwaukee was to be closer to my grandchildren. I moved from Southwest Portland to here. And let's see, I love it here. And some good advice that's worked for me is if you're in the middle of a crisis or some kind of emergency situation, it's not a good time to make decisions for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
So I will pass this on to Morgan. Hi, Morgan.
Hello, Arlene. My name is Morgan Pharisee. I live in the Ardenwald neighborhood. I moved here pretty recently this summer, but I grew up in Southeast Portland. I moved from the Montevilla neighborhood on the east side of Mount Tabor, and I have family that's been in Milwaukee for a long time, and I have friends that live here. So it wasn't a drastic change. It's a nice sort of little bit quieter, slower pace than living right between two freeways. So that's my story. My advice is never eat yellow snow. And I will pass it on to the other Sarah.
Hi, I'm Sarah Johnson. I live in the Hector Campbell neighborhood. I moved to Milwaukee in 2017, I think it was, and actually lived across the street from Krista, who I see here somewhere. Used to be my neighbor. And I don't know, I didn't know a lot about Milwaukee before I moved here and really didn't know what to expect from it, but I just have really fallen in love with it, and I love it here, and it's just got a nice sense of community. It's a good size. It's just, you can see it growing and developing. I think it's exciting, and I just want to be a part of it and learn more about it. Oh, and some advice. I don't know. Get enough sleep.
Always pertinent. Sarah, who's next?
How about David?
Hey, everybody. My name is David Enciso. I moved to Milwaukee, or my wife and I moved to Milwaukee maybe, I think 2.5, 3 years ago. We live in the Linwood neighborhood. Some general advice. Somebody told me, what did they say? In terms of like maintenance of taking care of things, they said, if you can't fix it, you don't really own it. So when they said it, I was like, okay, that makes a lot of sense. So, yeah.
Will you pick our next person?
Emily. Hopefully she didn't go.
We've got two Emilys with us. Oh, there you go. Emily Tucker, all yours.
I'll go. I'm Emily Tucker. I moved to Milwaukee 3 months ago, almost to the day. And if I look out my window, I can see City Hall. So I am downtown and new to the neighborhood. I was at Oregon Ballet Theater for 13 years and recently left to be a full-time mom, and I have 2 kids who are 10 and 7. I was interested in this class because after the last presidential election, I really wanted to hone in my political focus more locally. And luckily on Carefree Sunday, we were downtown and saw the ads for the class. And I thought, this is something I now have the time to do. So here I am. Some generally good advice. If you spill oil on your clothing right when you take it off, put baking soda on it until you wash it. It will mostly dry it out.
I'm writing that one down.
And I will say Rebecca.
Hi, I'm Rebecca. I am a very new Milwaukee resident. In fact, I haven't quite finished my move. So, but very happy to be moving to Milwaukee from Southwest Portland, where I have lived 25 years. So, and I'm very intentionally choosing to live in Milwaukee for the next chapter of my life. I'm a college professor and anthropologist. I work a lot with the tribes in the state and work a lot on equity issues. And just thought this would be a great way for me to learn more about my new home. And good advice, make friends across at least 3 generations. And next is Anand.
Hi, thank you. So I was in Milwaukee till the end of last month, but then I moved back to East Coast. However, during the time I was in Milwaukee, it wasn't that long, just a month or so. And I came across this in one of the news pamphlets or something that the city sends. And I thought I would apply, and here I am. So I'm like crashing the party, I guess. But with regard to an advice, I would say one thing that I like to do every day is to just go out in the afternoon for a brief, short walk, and hopefully go somewhere where there is water flowing, and maybe pick up a stone and bring it back. So if you guys want to do that, feel free to. And then the next person I would choose is Amy Miller.
Hi there, I am Amy. My connection with Milwaukee, I grew up here. I went to Concord Elementary and then moved to Portland thereafter and lived there until about July this year. And then my partner and I, we bought our first house, kind of, I think it's the historic Milwaukee neighborhood or right next to El Puente Elementary School. So yeah, we're kind of new to the neighborhood and filling it out. And otherwise my partner has a lot of family in the area. So kind of strong connections with that. Good advice. Let's see. Something I say to my daughter every day before she goes to school is be kind and be a good listener. And that's it. I don't see the names on here, so I'm not sure how I would call the next person. Beth? Did Beth already go?
Hello, no, I have not gone yet. My name is Beth, obviously. I use she, her pronouns. I have no idea what neighborhood I live in because I am directionally challenged. But I work at Starbucks. If you ever see me, feel free to say hi. I also work for WinPAC, which is the Women's Investment Network, helps get women elected to office. I've lived in Milwaukee for almost 2 years now, but I've lived in the greater Clackamas area for 13 years. And yeah, I would say a good piece of advice would be to have good, clear boundaries and stick to them. And next I will pass it to Danielle.
Hi, everybody. I moved to Milwaukee 4 years ago with my family. And really, we moved to Milwaukee because we bought a house, and this was the only place that we could afford a house. We were coming from Northeast Portland. And there wasn't a lot more intention than that. And I have to say that we really love living here, and we live in the Ardenwald neighborhood. We live on Olson Street, and I have the best neighbor community that I've ever had in my life. And that has just made such an impression on me about this town. I am an educator and a writer. I write curriculum that helps students confront issues of racism and bigotry and respond to it for a national nonprofit. And I'm really interested and engaged in equity issues, and certainly interested in how they manifest in Milwaukee. And my advice is to lead with compassion, because you never know what someone else is going through. Thanks. I am looking around. Maybe Kevin M.
Yeah, hi, thank you, Danielle.
Sure.
Yeah, and I believe I may be the last person, if I'm not mistaken, but I'll go ahead and proceed. Excuse me. Yeah, I've been in Milwaukee since the turn of the century, and I've had a couple of different careers in my time, and pretty much every job I've had not been done by anyone prior to me having it. So I've had a lot of opportunities to do new things. Sometimes that's fun. Sometimes it's not so much, depending on the situation. And I'm here in that I've become um, significantly more, shall we say, politicized and interested specifically in local politics over the past several years. And yeah, I'm really curious about how Milwaukee works, some of the values that it has, and I wanted to get more intimately familiar with that. I have had a long career in public sector jobs and still do in a different nearby uh, local government agency. So I'm quite familiar with local government particularly and understand how they work more generally. But I'm really curious about Milwaukee, my home, and how it works. And I would say, let me think about this for a second as far as advice goes. Oh, yes. I would suggest humming, singing, and dancing every day.
I like that.
Yeah, that's I think we all might be a lot happier with that. There is actually one person who.
Did I
Oh,
miss someone?
no. You're quite all right, and you're exactly right. I think unless I'm mistaken, in which case somebody please do cut me off. But I believe that everybody who is on the panel has spoken. I see that Emily is back as an attendee, and Emily, I'm going to try right now to promote you to panelist. And if you would like to speak, then by all means, please accept that invitation and jump on board. And it looks like you did. Yep, there you go. So I believe Emily is our last person. Were you?
Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. My internet cut out, and when I came back in, it was like I couldn't see anyone, and I've been trying to figure it out this whole time. But
welcome back.
Joining as a panelist fixes it. Great, thanks. I'm Emily Waugh. We have been living, my husband and I and our 2 kids here in Milwaukee. It'll be 3 years in December. We moved from Montana, and the reason I wanted to be in this class, I've just always been interested in politics and government. My AP government teacher, my senior year of high school, was my favorite teacher ever and my favorite class. And I just, similarly, I think it was maybe Sarah that said after the presidential election, she wanted, or no, I think it was the other Emily, that she wanted to focus more locally. And I feel sort of similarly, like my view has always been on the national level, and I've always followed and paid attention to and participated in government on that level, and kind of ignored more local levels until recent years. And I'm just wanting to know more and be more involved about what happens here in my home. And my generally good piece of advice is to not use the snooze button. It's bad for your brain. You feel more tired. That's it.
Thank you. So Dan, is Krista still with us?
I don't believe that Krista is still with us right now. My hope is that Krista will rejoin us at some point in the class, but I don't believe that she's here right now.
Okay. Is it break time?
It is break time. In fact, it's about 3 minutes into break time, but you know what, darn it, this year I am trying to not sacrifice break time, because break time is important too. So we're getting to 8, we're going to get to 8, and let's go ahead and have our 10-minute break. We'll be back at 7:23, if that works for folks, and we'll get right into it. There you go. Stefan's
right.
aha moment.
So my aha moment about this group is how bright and interested you are, but more than that, how many of you have come to Milwaukee fairly recently, not always on purpose necessarily, but you seem to be glad you're here. And that's impressive on a whole bunch of different levels, that you got here, that you like it, and that you're interested enough to take part in a class like this. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, welcome back, everybody. I believe that I've worked out the screen sharing problem, but if what that means is that I'm not going to have a really good view of the chat. So if you do have a question, I'm going to do my best to remember to pause at the end of slides. But if you do have a question, please go ahead and jump in, and I won't take it personally. I want to make sure it's more important to me that your question get asked and that you get heard than that I just ramble on.
And Dan, I can help monitor the chat line while you go through your slides.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Alrighty, so gonna share. Hey, there we go. All right, so tonight's class, we started out with the interview and with the questions for Mayor Mark Gamba and our city manager, Ann Ober. We did some introductions as in terms of who we all are as a class. And now we're gonna roll right into the kind of the second substantive chunk or informative chunk of the class. So we're going to talk about levels of government, forms of government, a section I call the best part of my job, and also why public involvement matters. So here we go. When we talk about government, that is broken down into several different levels. And there we're looking at, most people are familiar with the federal government, three branches of that government: the executive with the president, and the executive branch agencies, the legislative, the 2 houses of Congress, the judicial, the court systems. And for a lot of us, I think that's kind of, or maybe at the state level, that's kind of where we stop paying attention. But there's a tremendous amount of activity that takes place right down here at the local government level. When we talk about local government, that's anything down below the state level is generally the way that you'll hear that defined. And that can include things like special districts, which are governments that are instituted for a specific purpose. So if you hear about a school district, or if you hear about a fire district, or in Milwaukee, our parks, and in fact for a large chunk of Clackamas County, parks are handled by the North Clackamas Parks and Recreation District. These are special governments that are given to a specific task, and that do, generally speaking, have some taxing authority, and some rulemaking or regulatory authority, but they're not what are called general governments. You also sometimes will have things like regional governments. Here in the Portland area, we have what I believe is the only directly elected regional government in the form of Metro. And actually, I'll just go ahead and jump on to the next slide because that breaks it down that way. We have the Metro regional government, which started out actually as a land planning organization back in the middle of the last century. I want to say the early 1960s. More conventionally, people are familiar with county governments and with city governments, which in our case are Clackamas County and the city of Milwaukee. Now, for some of you who are not actually within the city, but who are living in unincorporated Clackamas County, the county is your local government, your most local government. But for those of us who are in the city, we do have our city council, our professional city government, which employs me, which formerly employed Stefan, which is hosting this this class here tonight. There's a difference. Go ahead, Stefan.
Just an add-on. TriMet is also a regional government entity.
Yeah, absolutely. TriMet's a great example. So there are different powers. These different layers of government are generally going to do different things. Something that really makes a city stand out in Oregon. Oregon's what's called a home rule state, which means that the individual cities have charters that they have put together and that they have gone to the state and effectively petitioned with those charters to form some kind of a local government. And in the state of Oregon right now, there are 200, and I want to say 41. Good thing I'm not being recorded. I'm fairly certain it is 241, but many of these city governments, and every single one of them has a charter that lists the powers of that government, the duties of that government, and the structure of that government. Questions about that before we bump on? Okay. So municipalities, just like it says, these are the most local subdivision of government. Common functions of municipalities are listed here, including public works, police and fire, libraries, utilities, which sometimes fall under public works functions. In other places are split out as special districts, and then urban planning as well, land use planning. Now, these are not, this is not to say that every single municipality is going to have every single one of these functions. But generally, you're going to get a grab bag of them. So in Milwaukee, for example, we do have our own police department, but we do not have a City of Milwaukee Fire Department. We did into the 1990s, I think.
Oh, after that.
Was it really?
Yeah.
Oh, there you go. And actually, originally, the building that I'm sitting in right now, Milwaukee City Hall, also housed our fire department. I am in an old bedroom, like a 1930s bedroom right now, but you wouldn't know it to look at it, what with all the cubicle walls. My point in all of this is to say that these are common examples of functions that might be performed by a local government, but are by no means comprehensive and are by no means exclusive. Oh, questions about that before we roll on? Cool. All right, form of government. Now there's an asterisk there. For those of you, Stefan, who looked at this before just now, you'll know that that asterisk wasn't always there. But Stefan and I had a pretty lively discussion about this afternoon, because what we really don't want you to take from this conversation is, or from this slide, is that there are only these types of these forms of local government. Because if I say there can be a council manager form, a commission form, a mayor council form, and a town meeting form, and you come away from that and say, all right, great, well, that's the only way that a city can be organized, or that those are all going to be exactly the same. One mayor council form is going to be the same from one city to the next. That's incorrect. These are, as the note says, descriptions, not hard definitions. And so I'm going to offer you some descriptions of these different forms of government and examples of them. But if you see that Portland, for example, looks a little bit different from some other commission form of government that you might be familiar with. Or if you look at the way that Milwaukee is organized in its charter and it elects council members maybe a little bit differently than Beaverton does. I don't know that Beaverton does. That's an example. That doesn't mean that they're not both council manager forms. So in Milwaukee, we have our council manager form of government. And what that means is that there is an elected city council. And we'll talk more about how exactly Milwaukee's council is elected in a minute, but they are directly elected by the people of the city. That council then is responsible for appointing a city manager in addition to 2 other officers of the city, and we'll talk about who they are momentarily as well. And then that city manager acts as the administrative head of government. That person is responsible for the hiring of staff, for the day-to-day running of operations of the city. And you read about that, you heard about that from Ann and the mayor. I don't want to belabor the point. But there is the thing about a council manager form of government is that there's a pretty stark division between the work of the elected government and the day-to-day operations of the professional or hired city government. Not that they're not working together, as we heard, council goals guide the work of the professional government, but it's a division of power, a division of labor. Another type is like what they have in Portland, a commission form. And with this, you end up with commissioners who are directly elected, but then who lead bureaus. So they are responsible, the elected officials are responsible, they act as department heads for these different, in Portland, they call them bureaus. In other places, they just call them departments, the way that we do here in Milwaukee. But you elect somebody who's going to come in and run those operations. And there are good things about that. We're going to talk in just a minute. I'm going to show you some of the criticisms and some of the things that people say in favor of a council manager form. Something that people will say about a commission form is that it's directly accountable, is that the people who are elected to these different bureau directorships, they are directly accountable to voters. And that's absolutely true. And there are positive things about that, and there are some things that are that sometimes can interfere with governance from that. It can complicate things, but it's directly elected to head departments.
So Dan, I'm going to run the risk of taking us further down this rabbit hole.
Go. You got it.
I think of Portland as a hybrid of strong mayor and commission form of government, because the mayor in Portland appoints the heads of the different bureaus. And if the mayor wants to be the head of all the bureaus, I guess he can do that. But it's not as if you get elected to be the water commissioner or the planning and sustainability commissioner, whatever. You get appointed to those positions by the mayor in Portland, and they don't have a city manager.
Right. And I really appreciate you bringing that up, especially because that absence of a city manager is, well, the presence of a city manager is something that sets aside a council manager form from these other forms. None of the rest of these have a city manager as such. And yeah, to Stefan's point, there's an argument to be made that Portland does represent a strong mayor, or rather a commission form of government with a strong mayor. The counterpoint to that would be that the mayor does not exercise any kind of an executive veto. The mayor, while he does introduce, in this case but while the mayor does introduce a budget each year, it's not that the mayor is solely responsible for compiling that budget. So it's, again, these are descriptions, not hard and fast definitions. And Portland is kind of an outlier anyhow, because among large cities in the United States, among the 30 largest cities in the United States, of which Portland is, I believe, 29, Portland is the only one still employing a commission form of government at this point. And
just, if people aren't already rolling their eyes back with too much information, I could say that 120 years ago, the opposite would have been true, and almost everybody would have had commission forms of government.
Yeah, very, very true. It was created, the commission form of government was created in response to a hurricane down in Galveston, Texas. And the idea was, well, we're going to get some people in, we're going to elect some people to take these bureaus and just really get them moving. And then just various criticisms of that over time. There were some concerns around corruption. There were concerns around cronyism. There were concerns around basically it being an ineffective way to continue operating a large modern city. And I'm going to reserve judgment on how that's operating for Portland. What I can tell you is there have been a number of attempts to amend the city of Portland's charter to change its form of government from a commission to something else, and those have all failed to secure enough votes among the population of the city to actually change it, to
Because
actually
they're
amend that
keeping
charter.
Portland weird.
Because they're keeping Portland weird, absolutely. Beaverton, prior to January of this year, had a mayor-council form of government. And this is another one that is still fairly prevalent out there, but it's getting rarer as more and more cities move over to this council-manager form. The way that works is that you have the elected mayor who's acting as effectively the executive branch of that city. That's not a perfect analogy, but it's close enough for getting along with. And then the council acting as effectively the legislative body. The mayor is the direct head of city government. The mayor under a mayor-council form oftentimes has higher fire authority over department heads, if not necessarily line staff of the city. Under that kind of a model, you can have, and that's where you generally hear discussions about a strong mayor versus a weak mayor form. And that too, again, goes back to just exactly how much power, how much authority a charter grants to an individual mayor. And then I do want to throw in an honorable mention here for my friend and colleague, Mr. Stefan Lashbrook, the town meeting. This is direct democracy, wherein one person gets one vote. You see this a lot more in New England, although I wouldn't be shocked if there were other places in the country where it had taken root here and there as well. And the way that this works is that periodically, and whether that ends up being once a year or once every 2 years, but from time to time, the people of a town come together and they decide on priorities and goals for the year, and they elect people to serve as their city government and get those goals accomplished, get that work enacted.
And in some of those, they can't even adopt an ordinance without a vote of the townspeople. I mean, I could give, I don't know, an ordinance to rezone a piece of property, or an ordinance to allow the city to buy or sell a piece of property. Couldn't do any of that without a vote of all the people.
Does anybody have questions about that? I know I kind of bounced through that a little bit, all willy-nilly. Anything at all? Okay. Well, on we go.
You've just covered about one college term of local government poli-sci right there. So
well, we got two more of these, and then we're free of it. So here we are. Council manager. So like I said, we're going to talk about some of the strengths and some of the criticisms of this. I'll hit this real quick. Professional expertise and stability. When you hire a city manager to run your city on a day-to-day basis, you're getting somebody who has experience in local government, generally somebody with pretty extensive education and management experience in local government, and somebody who is a professional. Under this, the city manager is accountable to elected officials, because the city council, or I guess in some forms theoretically the mayor directly, could has that authority to hire and then of course to fire the city manager. So the council acts as the boss, as the supervisor of the city manager. And then this also helps to insulate city functions a little bit from the various back and forths of the changing political winds. So if you do have someone who has been in a city management position as the city manager of a specific city for a while, then that person ideally is able to work with that city and with each new council to keep the work of the city moving forward. And that may need to adapt based on the goals of any new council or the instructions of any new council. But it's the idea is that it's sort of a steady hand at the wheel. Criticisms of this: power concentrated with an outsider. So if you're hiring a city manager, it's not at all unusual to see, if you're a city of any size at all, to see that search go nationwide. And so it's entirely possible that that a city will hire someone from the other side of the country. I believe the current city manager of Gresham was hired out of Arizona, is what I'm remembering. But that was a nationwide search, and so she
Ann Ober arrived here from a nationwide search. She came from Utah.
Yeah, absolutely. Great point. And so it's not that somebody who comes from Arizona or Utah to the Portland metro area is going to be totally unable to ever adapt or understand how things are done here. That's not the case. But there can be some fear sometimes and some I think legitimate concern. Does this outsider really understand the needs of our city? And so that's something that you will hear. That's a criticism that you will sometimes hear levied against a council manager form. Also, the city manager is not directly accountable to voters. Voters are not electing a city manager. They're electing that city council, and that city council will either keep the city manager or may decide that that city manager isn't really the best person to execute their collective vision. And at that time, you may see a city manager resign or be fired, be terminated. And then also there can be some concern around a short tenure. So although the International City County Management Association Code of Ethics does call for a minimum of a 2-year term or a 2-year commitment from city managers, that doesn't always happen. I mean, there are situations where you can have a city manager turning over every 6 months if it's a particularly troubled community or dealing with a particularly difficult challenge. Now, we've been fortunate here. Anne's been with the city, like she said, for 5 years. So it's not always the case that there's going to be a short term. It's not always the case that some outsider isn't going to be able to adapt to the city that they've come to manage. But these are concerns and these are criticisms, and I think it's fair to make folks aware of them. Questions about that?
I do have a question.
Please.
So you said one of the criticisms is that it can be too short of a tenure, but I was just curious, is there any sort of upper limit on how long a city manager can serve? You know, what would be the equivalent of a term limit? But
yeah, I'm not aware of one generally. Stefan, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No, not at all. I mean, it is such a volatile position. Just as an example, I was a city manager in a city where I was the 5th one in 7 years. And I stayed there for 2 years and was glad to get out. Tells you some things about politics in that setting. But I'm just, the longest term city manager I've ever known was a former city manager in Lake Oswego who served there for 16 years. And that is a long time when you think about politics of the city council changing potentially every 2 years. I could go on. I mean, Corvallis, I don't know if this is still true, but when I worked there, all 9 city councilors were up for re-election every 2 years. So that meant that everybody was always either running for office or fighting to maintain their position somehow. And a city manager in that kind of setting has no guarantee that they're going to be there longer than 2 years, no matter what they want to do.
Yeah.
It's a weird way to make a living.
Yep. Yeah. So no.
The thing that kind of is like bottom line of all of this to me is the person, and I heard this, so many times, and I probably will hear it tomorrow. Well, I'm really mad at so-and-so in the public works department or so-and-so in the planning department, and I'm going to talk to the mayor about getting them fired. And my answer in Milwaukee always is, well, they don't work for the mayor. They work for somebody who works for the city manager. And that's your chain of command. It's not to the mayor.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that kind of gets back to that. What can be a strength and what can be a criticism is that there is some insulation of city functions from from those political winds. But no upper limit for a city manager. I guess a city could enshrine that in their charter if they wanted to, but hard to imagine that happening. Anybody else? Okay. Alrighty. Oh, looks like we got some folks in the chat. One class specifically about Portland City Council. Fair. All right. So this is Milwaukee's organizational chart, and we are absolutely not going to dive into this right now. I am going to go ahead and share a PDF of this tomorrow with everybody. So by all means, keep an eye out for that. I'll send you a link to it. But this is the way that the city is organized. And if you go from the voters to the mayor to these city officers right here, I said we'd talk about them, and so we will. The municipal judge who oversees the city's court, we'll hear more about her work later on. And also the city attorney who acts as legal counsel for the city. We'll hear more about his work. But if we go down from the voters to the mayor to the city council, all the way over here to the city manager's office, and then drop straight down here to strategic engagement and emergency management, that's where I'm sitting in an old bedroom in an old firehouse.
And you're 2 boxes.
I am. I straddle 2 boxes. And this, which is mine, and I'm not letting go of this class. So
Dan, what I want to stress about, go back to that.
Yeah.
You'll notice every one of those boxes is under the city manager. That tells you something about her workload.
Yeah. Wow. Every you can be shifted every 2 years, and you got 11 departments reporting directly to you. No. In answer to your question, Ann, I don't think I'd like to be a city manager someday. Thank you just the same. Hey, look at that. It's our city council. So in Milwaukee, we have 4 councilors, 1 mayor. They're elected at large. And what that means is that they're elected by all of the residents, or all of the eligible voting residents of a city. And so rather than having districts or wards the way that they do in some places in Milwaukee, you can vote for anybody. They are term limited, which I believe is 2 terms, 2 consecutive terms at least. And we can go back and confirm that. They do hire those 3 city officers, again, the city attorney, the municipal judge, and the city manager. And then they set policy for the community. What kind of policies? Great question. Council goals for 2021 through 22. So these are what we're working on right now as a city. Climate change mitigation and resilience action. And that can be everything from preparing for, so in my world right now, there's a lot of discussion about flood preparation, not because we have any particular reason to expect any unusually large or an unusually high amount of flooding this year, but because we need to get ready for that, because we do continue to see wetter winters and just more erratic weather and a more erratic climate. So we're trying to prepare for that. Also, some of the clean energy work that we've talked about, ways of promoting active transportation, that ties back in there. Equity, justice, and inclusion. This has involved a lot of policy work. The city hired its equity program manager, John Hennington, who I need to find a good spot for John in the curriculum. But anyway, to engage in, among other things, some pretty assertive policy review work over the course of the last year, and that'll be ongoing. Cities will set a lot of goals. Different cities will set a lot of goals. Milwaukee generally has set 3. Right now, we're looking at these 2, and I believe the plan is to review those this coming summer and to look at picking a 3rd one potentially. But right now, council has kept that slot open. Questions about goal setting? I do see it 7:51. I do want to be respectful of our time, but also any questions at all, this is an okay time. Okay. NDAs, boards, committees, and commission. So without engaging in some PowerPoint karaoke, we have a bunch of boards, we have a bunch of committees, we have a bunch of commission, we have 1 commission, and sure enough, 7 neighborhood district associations. And if you are looking for ways to get involved in the city of Milwaukee, this is the way to do it. If you go to the city's website and look for boards and commissions, there will be a page that comes up, and if you have any trouble finding it at all, shoot me an email and I will be happy to connect you with it. We are constantly bringing people in, interviewing people, filling positions on different boards, committees, commissions. Most of the NDAs, neighborhood district associations, in the city right now have at least 1 spot that's open on their board, whether that ends up being the secretary or the land use representative or the public safety advisory committee representative. There are a lot of different ways that you can get involved with the city. So this is an area that I would point you towards. These are certainly not the only ways to get involved with the city, but this is a great big wide open door. The best part of my job, community engagement. So representative government, right, which we have because we're voting for our elected leaders, it only works to the extent that it's actually representative of the people that it's supposed to be serving. So for me, community engagement is a huge way of doing that, is really the way of doing that, of connecting people with their governments and connecting governments with their people. Whether that ends up being some kind of just a civic event like we see there on the left, the Milwaukee Homecoming Parade, the Milwaukee High School Homecoming Parade, whether that ends up being something like Carefree Sunday, where we get the community together and where we have people out just having fun, getting to meet their neighbors, whether that's something like this housing town hall that's pictured there on the right, where we brought in community members. Look at that, not a mask in sight. Wow, wow, wow. Brought community members into the gym at the Waldorf School to ask them about the kind of housing and the housing needs of the kind of housing they'd like to see and the housing needs of our community. So this is it right here. I mean, this for me, this is my very favorite part of this. And I will go ahead and say again, thank you all for being here because it matters. And oh, hey, look at that. There's even a slide about that. Change is constant. We are going to at some point have a new city council. We are going to at some point have new residents. A lot of the folks in this room right now have just moved to the city. We are living in an ever-changing, ever-evolving world, and the people who are involved get to decide what that change will look like. So whether that's light rail coming to Milwaukee, whether that's an opening of the new multi-use path, whether that's the South Downtown Plaza, whether that's refocusing on equity and inclusion, whatever your issue is, whatever the thing is that you care about, somebody is going to be making decisions about it. And the people who get involved, the people who come to the meetings, the people who are on the boards, who are on the committees, who are attending their NDAs, they're the ones who are going to get heard. And they're not the only ones, but they do tend to have louder voices. So I really commend all of you for taking this first step to learn more about local government and to be more actively involved. And whether that ends up being something officially through the city, or maybe you want to get involved in community emergency response, or maybe you want to organize some kind of a local food pantry, whatever that ends up being, I really, really congratulate you and I thank you for taking the time to get involved because it really matters that you show up.
Okay, Dan, I was about ready to cut you off.
Go.
Because it's time for aha moments. Did anybody learn something tonight that made them go, wow, I had no idea about that. That's interesting. I already told you mine. Anybody? Nobody learned anything tonight?
I learned about Milwaukee itself. I didn't know that much about Milwaukee's form of government. It's especially interesting to me because in Oak Grove, we're exploring possibly becoming a part of Milwaukee.
Or becoming a city of your own.
Or becoming a city of our own. So the more you know, the more you know. And the more you know, you don't know.
I was surprised to learn that the mayor doesn't get paid at all. Is basically volunteer. Is that what?
Well, he gets some kind of stipend, which is just a pittance. I don't even think it covers his bicycle tires.
For a more than full-time job, that's kind of nuts to me.
Yep.
But I mean, commendable to him, but also limits the number of people who could do that job, which is unfortunate.
I agree with you.
It's a very astute observation, and that is a major point of contention and a big discussion point just within governments broadly is paid city councils versus not.
Well, I was going to say, I kind of assumed that cities had a mayor and then a council, and it kind of worked like the example you showed on Beaverton. So to see that all the different types and kind of how they work was something that I wasn't aware of before.
Yeah.
I have a question, but I'll make it fast. So you said the mayor gets a stipend, but is there any kind of training requirement for boards and councils to be able to receive that stipend?
I think you're doing that right now. That's a little bit of a joke, but it's not as if there's a requirement. But in fact, the city council has drawn people from the Leadership Academy over the last couple of years and encouraged them to serve on boards and commissions, things like that. So
we moved from Missouri, and there's a state statute that your boards and councils, they can't get paid unless they've attended 8 hours of relevant training. And so the state offers board and council training to those municipalities.
Fascinating. That's
Yeah.
that's an interesting way to do that.
Yeah.
I will say here locally, there is a just sort of a procedural training that is offered by our city recorder to new and returning members of council. They do an annual retreat in the summer, and our city recorder Scott Stauffer, who we'll all meet next month when he comes to talk with us about city history, is he provides some of that. But yeah, for most of the boards and boards and committees and the commission, not a whole lot of formal training.
I had a quick question about the police in Milwaukee. Does the police report directly to the city manager, or is there some sort of commission or committee that oversees the police here?
Yeah, so the police are headed up by the chief of police, who then in turn reports, as all the other department directors do, directly to the city manager. So there's not a like a civilian oversight board. There's not. The short answer to your question is no. There's not any kind of an intervening board. It's a direct chain.
Let me jump on that and say, and I'll preface this by saying the police chief is a friend of mine, but I would say he is a very approachable individual. And if you have issues with policing in Milwaukee or questions about policing in Milwaukee, call the police chief directly.
You know, I've had such great experiences with him, and I did email the police in general earlier in the year or late last year. I can't remember when it was, and he followed up, a week and a half later and said, I just want to make sure that someone got back to you and answered this question. And like you said, it was very approachable. Nothing but a good experience with him. I was just kind of wondering how it was structured formally within the city government.
Yep, that's it.
Nope, totally great question. It is 8 o'clock, so for folks who do need to jump off, I do want to say that's that. Stefan, do you have any parting words?
Not really. What a great start. I appreciate all of you. I'm really glad we're doing this. I'm glad to be back.
Yeah.
Where are we going next month, Dan?
Oh yeah, so next month we are going to talk about the history of the city. So I think it's probably useful to ground us in just how the heck is this thing shaped, and then going into next month we talk a little bit about where we've been. Now that's a pretty active one. We are going to hear from the Milwaukee Historical Society and from our city recorder, but I've also reached out this year to the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde to see if we can't get some folks out here to speak about the pre-European settlement history and culture of this land.
That's excellent. And take this with you in the next month. This would never have become a city but for people storing dynamite in their garage.
Oh yeah, that's a great story. More about storing dynamite. Kevin, I do see your hand up, so I'm going to go ahead and end the recording here, and I'm going to say goodnight to everybody. But if you do have additional questions, and if anybody does want to stick around, I'll be here for a little while yet.
All right, thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Good night. Kevin, are you going to jump on there?
Yeah, thanks.